Hello, Pebble Beach. My name is Just
And
Eva,
I'm DJ Jeff.
and we are joined here with Mr. Provo. He teaches science at our school.
Thank you for having me.
Specifically, you teach the astronomy class.
I do. I teach astronomy and ninth grade science.
Which is why we're interested in talking to you about the solar eclipse that you experienced over the summer of 2018.
Oh, yes. This past summer, I went with my two sons and another Stevenson faculty member and their family down to Chile in South America for the total solar eclipse that happened on July 2nd.
Yeah. Why did you go all the way to Chile to see the solar eclipse?
So solar eclipses, they happen only when the shadow of the moon is between the Earth and the sun, and the shadow of the moon passes across the surface of the Earth. So when it passes across the surface of the Earth, that happens in a very narrow band. And so this particular solar eclipse, the only place that you could see it was either in Chile or in Argentina.
It's very cool. Do you mind just explaining just a little bit what it's like a total solar eclipse is like?
Sure. So a total solar eclipse, as I said, is the shadow of the moon passing across the surface of the Earth. It happens fairly rarely. There are only two times during any particular year that a total solar eclipse could happen, but those solar eclipses are not always total. The moon does not always totally cover the sun, and that can happen or not happen, not totally cover the sun because the Earth and the sun are a little bit off of phase with each other, so you only get what's known as a partial eclipse. It can also happen that the moon is too far away from the Earth and the sun is too close to the Earth, so that the moon doesn't cover the sun entirely. That's a little idiosyncrasy of geometry. It turns out that the moon in the sky and the sun in the sky are both almost exactly the same size. So it's possible that if the sun is a little bit closer to the Earth, or I should say the Earth is a little bit closer to the sun, that the sun is a little bit larger than the moon and the moon won't cover it completely.
So there is a kind of eclipse happening soon that our viewers might be able to see?
So there are both lunar eclipses and solar eclipses that happen every year, but there's a very interesting event happening this coming Monday on November 11th, and that is the planet Mercury passing in front of the sun. Now, the planet Mercury is incredibly small in comparison to the size of the sun. So if you're walking around outside, you won't notice the sky getting dimmer or see the shadow of Mercury. But if you have a telescope that has a solar filter on it, you can take a look at the sun and you'll actually be able to see the planet Mercury cross across the surface of the sun. The transit of Mercury, or the passing of either Mercury or Venus in front of the sun, is what some of the early astronomers used to actually be able to figure out the size of the planets, the distance that the planets were away from the sun. You can do some geometry with those in order to figure that out. Here on campus on Monday, we will have a telescope set up, and as long as it's clear and sunny, we'll have a solar filter on that telescope, and students and faculty and anybody that's around will have the opportunity sometime between sunrise and about 10:30 in the morning to take a look at the sun and see the planet Mercury, which is actually the most difficult of all the planets to observe.
How did you get interested in astronomy in the first place?
So I was always interested in looking up at the stars as a kid, but my science training, my science background is not in astronomy at all. I'm a biologist by training, a marine biologist in particular. But I've always been interested in looking at the stars. I had a college roommate who one of my favorite stories was that he and his family were really into backpacking, and they had a rule that whenever you went out backpacking, as you got ready to go to sleep at night, you weren't allowed to fall asleep until you'd seen a shooting star and a satellite. Those are two easy things to see. In fact, I went on a camping trip with my astronomy students this fall, and we saw satellites and shooting stars each night that we were out. And then about 8 years ago, as we were talking here at school about other possible elective classes to teach students, one of the things that I said to the chair of our department was, well, I'd be interested in teaching a class in astronomy. And once we decided that that's what the class should be, then I spent more time getting my astronomy skills a little bit stronger before I started teaching that class.
What pieces of advice would you give to any students interested in getting into astronomy?
I think getting into astronomy, my piece of advice is just to go outside and look up. If you start enjoying the night sky, seeing what is there always, seeing what changes, then that's a great place to start. There are lots and lots of apps that you can get for your phone that will start explaining to you what you see in the night sky. And I think that's a great way to get involved. You don't need a telescope to get involved in astronomy. It's great if you know somebody that has a telescope to go and spend some time taking a look through telescopes, but you don't have to go out and purchase a telescope to be interested or to start doing things in astronomy at all.
Yeah, Mr. Provo, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Yeah,
to
thanks
talk to
everyone
us
for
about
listening in to Night Mode on KSPB Pebble Beach 91.9 FM. Thanks, Mr. Provo.
Thanks for having me.